One of the big problems with the current education system within the trades is that a lot of the content that we're taught going through a program, whether it's, TAFE in Australia or college in the US or whatever it might be, is that a lot of the information and the curriculum that we're being taught is archaic, like it's outdated. I remember when I went through my plumbing apprenticeship, I was taught things like lead welding. I mean, you're never ever going to use lead welding in a practical application. Imagine if you could train your team on current processes, current tools, current systems, current technologies, and do it all essentially remotely. Well, that's the future, guys. And in today's podcast, we're going to be talking about virtual reality, specifically relating to training and education within the trades. And just as I said, you can basically train your technicians and your team on the latest and greatest heat pump or air conditioning unit or new plumbing technology or new switchboard installation, all through the majesty of a headset. I know it all sounds a little bit like Back to the Future, but it is actually becoming more and more relevant, more and more prevalent, and quite sought after. And I think within the next 10 years or so, you're going to see a lot more of these programs and technologies emerging. So not that I'm a futurist or anything like that, but I know going back even 5 or 10 years ago, going to a trade show and seeing some of the cool things that were sort of coming to surface back then in that space. And after today's conversation, I've learned there's a lot more going on than I ever thought possible already. And looking forward, is going to be some formidable change within that space, which breathes a lot of relief to you guys out there that are running business and are struggling at the moment to perhaps get your team and your staff to be current and learn the current things and the current processes. Especially a lot of the guys out there that have been practicing a certain trade for a long time. It's often quite a challenge to teach an old dog new tricks, so to speak. So this space is evolving rapidly, guys, and I think I'm going to absolutely love this podcast and quite frankly blown away with those, the potential here and where this direction is headed. It's a little bit creepy, to be honest. It's a little bit like Skynet, but I think in hindsight, the reality of the situation, pardon the pun, is that it's going to be quite a huge advantage to us as trades, to you guys as tradespeople, purely based off the fact that, while there's a lot of software and technology that's evolving in the world today, there's not a lot that, enables you to, as tradespeople, get like a practical way to train your team on new and evolving technologies or models of, equipment that you guys use without necessarily having to be a labor-intensive, time-consuming, hands-on, sort of process, which is what it currently is. So enjoy the show, guys. I would love to hear your feedback if you guys are doing anything like this, or you've had any experience with anything to do with virtual reality or more augmented reality beyond Pokemon Go, that is. I'd love to hear your feedback. And of course, if you've got any questions, guys, or if you've got any feedback, please head across to the private Facebook group. And if you're not a member of that, you should be, because there's some awesome conversations that happen in there. And, I would just love to have you guys as part of that, be part of the conversation. So anyway, guys, that's all from me. Enjoy the show. Today's podcast has been proudly brought to you by Tradie Web Guys. Tradie Web Guys work with tradespeople only on their websites and marketing solutions to help them stand out from their competition. Everything from web design through to SEO, search engine marketing, content creation, you name it, guys. It is a customized solution for trade-based organizations, and it's fantastic. Head across to tradiewebguys.com.au/apply, fill in the form, and let's have a conversation.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the Site Shed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Doug, welcome to the Site Shed podcast.
Thanks, Matt. Happy to be here.
Hailing all the way from where?
Austin, Texas.
Yeehaw!
It's hot.
Yeah, I guess you're in the middle of your summer. We were just talking offline, actually. It's funny because we're over here in Sydney. We don't really have winters in Australia. Kind of a joke. My wife's from Winnipeg, so she always laughs when people talk about winter in Australia. But I think it's about 20 degrees Celsius here, which is quite nice.
Yeah, that's good living right now because we are in the heat of it for sure. The belly of the beast, the real downside of living in Austin, Texas, is about 3.5 months of indoor season because you need the AC.
Yeah. And so you're from Interplay Learning, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about technology in the trades and a lot about education and a bit about virtual reality, I suppose, how that's coming along from the education point of view, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm excited to share what we're seeing on the bleeding edge of technology. I say bleeding because sometimes we're getting bloody trying to invent new things, but that's part of the game.
Yeah, man. You know what? I love technology, and a lot of the listeners and viewers out there, they're mad for it. There's probably at least 2 comments a week in our group, which is questions in our group around the technology space, normally related to, job management or bookkeeping or, something like that. So the guys are definitely interested in, up and coming tools. Pretty mad for it myself. Like, we're huge on project management and all these kind of geeky tools that if you had have asked me 10 years ago, I probably would have fallen asleep when you were talking about it.
Well, yeah, that's kind of the exciting thing for where we're sitting is you look at the digital transformation, which is what you're representing from workflow to customer management. And all of that is, 20 years in, and it's really starting to get smart. And the early adopters were on it 15 years ago, but the mass markets are all there because they've really made it easy. But what hasn't happened is any of the technical training. It hasn't to date really at any scale leveraged some of the technology that's available.
Yeah, it's true. We still, everyone in Australia goes to TAFE, which is like our college, and studies, studies the foundations and then goes and applies it in the workplace. There's nothing that's really done, from a tech point of view in any of that.
That's right.
In fact, it's archaic, to be honest.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And a lot of the stuff we're bringing to market is not exactly, I said bleeding edge, but, military, medical, aviation industries where lives were at stake, they've been investing in this kind of technology for literally decades. And one, they were well capitalized, so they could afford to do it, right? Expensive stuff, but lives were at stake. So if they needed to use the best in VR technology in 2005 and they thought it would save a soldier's life, they did it. Or, flight sims or all those things. So it's really now just starting to become available for, a trade, electrical, HVAC, plumbing, all of that.
It's funny you say that, actually. Like now that you've mentioned it, I recall 15 odd years ago when I was living over in Canada, and in Calgary Airport, they had a jet plane simulator. And at the time I thought, this is cool. It's like a video game. But then looking back on it, it was probably one of the early adopters of VR, really.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They used to call them caves, something virtual, because they're, instead of on your face was what we can do now on a $300 device. Instead, it was a $3 million room that really simulated that experience. And to this day, pilots get certified on planes that they've never sat in. That they actually just do it through simulation. Now they have to do, hours on, to get certain licenses. But if you just want to get on a certain type of plane you want to get certified on, you don't necessarily have to be in the plane. So they've come a long way, as you can imagine, in that industry. And, again, military, medical, surgeons been using these types of things for decades as well, because it turns out it's not a great idea to, cut your cousin's legs just to practice your skill as a surgeon. So simulation's a pretty good way to do it.
Nice. Well, Doug, just give us a bit of a intro to, I suppose, you and your background, and a bit of a spiel on Interplay. I'm sure the listeners out there would be quite interested.
Interplay is we say we're 4 years old because that's, really when we saw this big need in the marketplace, this, pretty massive skills gap worldwide in the trades. Actually, Australia is one of the markets that's healthier than most, frankly. Internationally, skilled trades are kind of a disaster when it comes to getting skilled people into jobs. I think 7 years running. It's the number one area. And so it was really 4 years ago we saw how big this need was, an opportunity. But we had started years before that just building these point of view simulations for learning technical skill sets. And we've done it, not in different areas. But where it all started was I was with a training company. And back in 2010, 11, really 2010, and it was hard to get people in the field. And, we had a business model to support, and so you couldn't do 10 days in the field. The course would have to be too expensive. And so, long story short, we just said there's got to be a better way. My background was I did a .com back in 99 here when I was living in San Francisco. That's how I'm old. And so I'd been through this once before. And so I sort of knew how the game worked a little bit in terms of raising money and all that. And this one, I just said, let's just go slow and just build a real expertise around how to do this and not try to conquer the world. So we did that for a number of years. And really about 2016, we said, I think we got the skill set, the market's there, let's go after this. So yeah, we're a classic. We're slightly less than 50 employees now, but it's a story now that's starting to be fun to tell because we pushed a stone up a hill for a long time, and now the market's really starting to draw it in, and it feels like we popped over the top, and now it's rolling down the hill.
It's interesting the different, I suppose, education structures throughout different markets around the world. Like I lived in Canada and I lived in America and I lived in the UK and in France and all these places. And it just seems like everywhere that we went as an Australian tradesperson, we were sought after because I guess our education system in the trades is really deep and there's really high level of curriculum.
Yep.
And so, I mean, living in the UK, people were like, oh my God, you're an Australian plumber. Oh, great. Okay, you're hired. And you're like, what?
Yeah, that's right.
And then I noticed in the States, like when I was working over there was a lot of people that were, builders or whatever that didn't necessarily have, they weren't certified as such, but they were still able to operate.
Yeah, it's a mess. It's a patchwork. You got 50 states. Every state has a different set of rules for being a plumber or a HVAC tech or electrician. Some of them are very rigorous and requiring certification. Some of them are, raise your hand and call yourself a plumber and you're a plumber. Mm-hmm. And so, it's confusing. The investment in vocational training really disappeared for a couple decades. I mean, there's some of it, but really reduced as we were all told, go get your 4-year college degree. And become lawyers. And it's, so we don't really have the infrastructure to stand it back up. You have this huge skills gap. And you also had a demographic gap, right? Because you had these baby boomers. In our country, there's like 72 million of them. And then my generation's only 33 million. So we're already at we have a gap just by numbers. And then we didn't go into the trades generally and they were discouraged. And so, you just had this erosion. And so, I don't think we're anywhere near. And for us, frankly, to try to catch up is foolish, right? We could never rebuild the system that you guys have held and built and enhanced, et cetera. That's kind of where we hope we jump in, is that we can kind of bolt on some of the latest and greatest in education technology to kind of leapfrog a little bit and say, let's try to catch up this way. Because you can imagine the institutional friction of trying to stand a lot of this stuff back up almost from scratch again. It just wouldn't work.
I mean, I know when I started the podcast, even there was to sit at a roundtable event for the Department of Education down in the capital of Australia. And I was the only one there without a government email address. I was sort of like this guy with a digital agency, who works with tradies and is a tradie. And a lot of the conversations there, interestingly, specifically talking about VocEd, like vocational education and implementing elements of training and education within the trades to kids that are going through high school. It was interesting that a lot of the feedback that was given was there's a lot of systemic hand-me-down baggage that comes from, like you just said, that generation, which is like, go and do your 4 years of college, son, go and get your degree and be an accountant or a lawyer, and that whole mindset. It was really haltering kids from entering into skilled work, trade labor and things like that. And the whole education system was kind of geared towards it because you're being educated by people that have been through the system, right? It's kind of systemic, ringworm of things that just keeps going around and around. And you're like, this is ridiculous because a lot of kids aren't academic, and I'm sure many of the listeners and viewers out here would relate to that. I mean, some of the smartest people I know are not academic,
Sure. And you look at countries like Germany, right? Germany has, we were reading the stats the other day, 51% of 18-year-olds are on a vocational path. Yeah. 51%. And, that doesn't mean they're going to be an HVAC tech or plumber. They might be working for a robotics company in a factory, and there's, they're learning some dynamic stuff, robotics or whatever, but it's vocation related. And pretty technical, and they quickly get into apprenticeship programs there that are the employers are often footing the bill for some of the general education as well as this specific trade or technical education. And it's a model that, I mean, I'll be honest, there's no way you could stand that up in the US at this point, right? The scale, it's just so efficient, and Germans are infinitely more efficient than Americans anyway. So we're already a huge disadvantage. And so, yeah, there's a lot of work to be done to try to catch up.
No one does it like the Europeans, the Swedes, the Germans, the Slovakians, all those like countries. They're just incredible when it comes to like what they produce. And any of you listeners and viewers, if you ever get the opportunity to go to one of the German trade shows, IFAT or something like that, just do it. It will blow your freaking mind. The scale of this thing is just out of this world. And you just see firsthand, you're like, we like drops in the ocean compared to what these guys are doing. Like everything from recycling through to waste management, through to water, through to, desalination, like everything. Like there's just light years ahead. And like you say, it's hard to, we'll never catch up. Australia is the same. And funnily, well, sadly, I should say, like Australia's education system within the trades is actually getting less and less. Like they're cutting courses back due to funding and, all that kind of stuff. And so it's becoming a bit of an issue out here as well. We're probably not heading directly down the path that you guys are at the moment, but who knows, it could end up getting that way.
Yeah, I mean, we should be what's the word for negative case study? I mean, a warning case for you, because it's tricky here. I mean, companies can't grow because they can't find, as their baby boomers retire, they can't get adequate replacements. Companies, I mean, in Austin, if you need HVAC fixed in the summer, like you might call 3 places that say, we won't service it, we'll just replace it.
Right.
Because there's more margin on the install and they're so busy that they can say no like crazy. And so sometimes you'll wait, days and even weeks. I've heard stories of even weeks of trying to get service. And imagine that. You live in the temperatures we have and you can't get service. So yeah, I hope we're a cautionary tale. That's the phrase I was looking for. You think we might be a cautionary tale. So you got to get back to that government meeting and tell them the story about America trades. Yeah.
I mean, I think we do have a bit of an issue here as well, I suppose, with the skills in the sense of, well, first of all, we don't have enough of them. And so so their mindset was, well, okay, well, we haven't got enough of them, but we've got to put them through these rigorous 4-year training courses to be qualified. Let's just cut their training back and then they'll be qualified and we'll have more of them. And we're like, no, that's a stupid idea.
Yeah. So but what you can do, Matt, now is better competency-based training that can condense time, right? And so that's the beauty of like the simulation. Again, harken back to the military examples. I mean, there are stacks of papers where they've used the best in education technology and they've taken 30-week, 4-week programs and made them 17. And learning outcomes are better, right? Or you put a soldier in a tank for 6 weeks, or you put a soldier in a tank for 3 weeks, in a simulated tank for 3 weeks. And the people who did both, much better outcomes, faster time to competency, because simulations allow them to condense learning time, condense experience, right? We'll put them through 50 simulations in the time you could do one in a live training event, right? So you can imagine, particularly where it's on the cognitive side, where it gets powerful. So if you're cutting back and you want to say, well, we want the 4-year programs to be 2-year, if they're leveraging better competency-based education, that's possible and still get better outcomes. It's just there has to be a willingness to adopt it and really spend some time and money on it.
And I think that's the key, like the willingness to adopt something new. And I think that's where, I mean, if I even look back during my apprenticeship, like I can remember there were days and days where I'd be like, get to the office and I'd be like, what am I doing today? And they'd be like, oh, just go clean the shed. And so then you've got this, like this whole model, which is geared around, you go to TAFE, you do your 1 day a week, you learn some skills, then you go out to work and you apply those skills and you learn other things, But like the reality is that doesn't always happen. Or, and credit to what you're saying there in the sense of, you might get kids that growing up, and I had lots of friends that grew up sort of doing like construction work, and they would be like, right, for the next 12 months, you're doing water rough-ins. And you don't learn anything about the trade. Like you just like just throwing pipes in a wall and rendering it, So I think there's a lot of merit to like some sort of program which can put people through like different simulations. And you're right, it would definitely compress it. I suppose the issue there would be building up the programs and then getting them accredited and,
right,
compliance
which is
and all this
always
kind of stuff.
a challenge. But I mean, you think about the example, you guys aren't as active with like Amazon, I think, as we are here. We basically live on it. But Amazon knows so much about us, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like I buy a brown shirt, it knows to serve me like the next three things are like, a certain kind of undershirt and matching socks and whatever else, right? Like it quickly identifies what I know or who I am or what I'm doing and then what I should do next. And that same technology can be applied to education, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can see, oh, here's Matt. He's showing good trade math skills like this. So let's give him the next hardest set of trade math skills. Let's give him the next, right? So it's really smart in terms of the path to get there as well. So that kind of thing's hard to do, right? By humans. Like they're just not paying attention enough to know about exactly what you know and what you should be served next. And so, yeah, if you can find the right program to weave in both the education technology and the hands-on, right? It can't replace the hands-on. I can condense it, but it can't replace it. But there's huge opportunities to get smarter and more efficient with delivery of training.
Sorry, I'm just screaming it. Yeah, I think coffee delivery.
All right, look at that.
That whole mindset around, and it's mindset, I think, like realistically, because there's like a fear for these the way programs are currently run, there's always fear in something they don't know, right? Like, and then there's, what about the fear of the backlash? What happens when we implement something like this and something goes wrong? And, then who's going to be held liable, I think that's like, there's like red tape, essentially. It's just red tape.
Sure. Yeah, that's right. And, interestingly, as a company, we sell right to the market, to the workforce, not to the education world. Because of that exact thing, right? What I can do is go into a service company and pretty much make the argument and show them the statistics, how I can make their techs more effective, quicker, boom, boom, boom. And they're like, great, where do I sign? Right? And we're done. It's sales made and off they go and they're pleased as punch. I have to make that same that pitch into education. It'll happen. It'll just take 18 months, right? And so, yeah, absolutely. There's challenge there with institutional red tape.
Obviously, growing up here, like that is the obstacle because people don't necessarily that's the only, in order to get certified, you've got to go through, in order to get licensed and certified and be compliant, you actually have to go through the system. And so you can learn everything you want outside of business. And actually, funnily enough, that's kind of where the sci-shed comes into play as well, because I realized early in the piece that there's so much you need to learn about running a business that you don't get taught at college.
Sure. Yeah,
right?
Makes sense.
They can teach you how to swing a hammer, and they can teach you how to, to fine tune some of the skills. But nowhere do they teach you how to run. I think when I went through the course, the licensing course, I think there was like a 6-month or 6-week maybe business part of a component, and it was horrendous. It was like, this is how you write a business letter. This is how you write it on an envelope. Like, what? It's just ridiculous waste of time.
Yeah. So our stuff, that's interesting because you think about our stuff may not appeal at all because so in this country, in most states, I can hire Bob off the street or Sally off the street, train them up pretty good. And they might be, we might be tracking their hours for some kind of apprenticeship program that's registered or they could sit for exams along the way, et cetera. There's very few, if any, true requirements that you're, butts in the seats, as they say here, that you have to go through these programs. Some of them are, you have alternatives. One of them might be, if you did 2,000 hours in this type of trades program, then yes, that counts. Or you could do X, Y, or Z and then pass these exams. So there's sometimes multiple ways. And like I said, when we started, some cases you don't need any of that, right? You just need to know how to show up, do the job.
Yeah, you know what though? I'm sure, I know actually, I can guarantee you there'd be loads of viewers and listeners out there that would be thinking, I would freaking love to put my apprentices through some sort of compressed training like that, because they know as well as the rest of us that they're not getting it at TAFE. They may get it at TAFE, but some of the things you're learning at TAFE and college are quite outdated anyway, Yeah. And I mean, you better than anyone knows how fast technology is moving in the trades today. And there's some things they teach you, which is just, I remember even when I was at TAFE, some things they teach you were from 150 years ago, plumbing, like lead welding and things you're you'd never heard of it, is it?
Right. So, and we hear that a lot actually from our customers who say we pick up people out of trade school, but we pretty much have to train them anyway.
Right.
And because of that, because it's not tethered to what they're doing day to day. And so there is a disconnect.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think that disconnect, to be fair, is actually relevant. It's not vertical specific. And I look at my own business, and now we're sort of running a digital agency. To be honest with you, I don't really care what bit of paper you've got. Like, don't tell me, show me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and when you speak to a lot of we have a lot of conversations about recruiting and hiring and how to find and retain team. And the guys that are doing it quite well, just like you said, they're not necessarily. Some of the guys are actually, especially the guys in the US, a lot of those guys are hiring people just based on the fact they've got the right attitude that they can train.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We say it all the time. Hire for attitude will help you train for aptitude.
Right.
For sure. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And so then that kind of, obviously the ripple effects there are significant when you're talking about, certifications, like red tape certifications, government, you are a licensed plumber. Well, no, you're not. You haven't done your actual, you haven't been through TAFE, you haven't done the course. Yeah, but I've done this thing, and, you may well be a better operator than any other equivalent level, students that went through the actual system, but because you haven't got the bit of paper at the end, you're basically written off. So
that's right.
So I think most of the employers and a lot of the listeners and viewers out there would be saying, this is epic. I would love to put my kids through something my apprentices through this sort of stuff. But they still have to go and do the actual certification.
There are other ways to do it, but there's definitely, people should be looking online. Yeah. Others, not just for Interplay Learning, obviously, what other ways can I accelerate learning and build a culture of learning? And that's what we've seen. And I think we've seen over the last 6-8 months where things really just blew up and took off for us. It was service companies who said, I just got to solve this myself. I can't wait for someone else to produce these amazing candidates.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. I got to go find some bodies, good attitudes, and I got to figure out how to train them efficiently, right? They might have had a job shadowing program, like you said, but if it was go clean the shed, that's not a very good training program.
Yeah.
And so, we find that there's a lot of adoption basically for their younger to mid-level techs saying, look, they got holes in their education, or I'm just trying to get this culture of I want to get better. I can always learn. There's probably a more efficient way to do that, diagnostic, things like that. Even invite conversation. We have some fun. We invite good conversations when we'll build something in a simulation on, let's say you have a diagnostic tree this way, and someone else says, oh, I like it this way, or our company, we do it this way. And we always say, great, have that debate. Internally, talk about it. So everyone gets level set and better understands systems. That's healthy. Those are healthy conversations. There are, several different ways to do a lot of jobs. So those are good. That to me is good. Now you're building a culture around learning and developing and getting better. And you should see that in efficiency, right? And fewer callbacks and that type of thing, fewer errors in the field.
Yeah, and that's actually, so we've had a lot of guests on the show, and I'm going to introduce you to a few guys actually, because I think you'd have a really good chat with them. They do just that, and they've built this amazing business model, and a couple of these guys coach people on how to do it also, but essentially they bring that team culture into a little ecosystem there where everybody's investing and buying into process creation, what they're learning, and they run weekly training, simulations and, things. So, and then the whole team sort of buys into it. It's a really good trust and rapport building exercise for the team because they're contributing to it as well as partaking in it at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That is there. We love those customers because we basically plug into that program and we're the technical training piece because that's often the piece that's missing. And we have more success stories around companies like that than the companies who kind of we threw it over the wall and no one logged in.
Right.
Well, you're right. You got to get buy-in across the board. You got to feel people are developing mastery. They have autonomy to keep advancing. They feel like they're being invested by their company. We talk a lot about this, the new generation, all the surveys show, 22-year-old will take a career path, visibility, and investment in themselves over money any day. A little different than my generation. We probably would have taken the higher paycheck. But this generation really wants to feel like that company's invested in them, in developing and advancing them. And the companies that adopt that, and it sounds like you have some really neat consultants who help, roll out programs like that. We see a huge gap in performance from our customers to those who have that type of commitment, not just to learning, but really to employees, and those who don't.
And like credit to that conversation, and this is something that we've spoken about so many times on the show. And one of my colleagues and friends, Al Levy, who you may have heard of, the 7-power contractor, who I'm definitely going to intro you to. But when I've had him on the show talking about how to build a great team and how to recruit for a great team, and also Danny from BT Academy over in Vancouver, Canada, also really great frameworks on recruitment. And they both kind of have a different kind of process, but it essentially does the same thing. They're not hiring people for a job. They're recruiting people that are looking for a career. Yeah. And the whole entire process is completely revolved around hiring people with a long-term vision. And so they can come on board. And I do it with my team now, and it works amazingly because they can come in, they can see where they sit in the organization chart, where they're coming in, where they can be in 12 months. And as Al says, this is the difference between your staff member jumping ship for an extra $5 an hour because the other company's not offering them a career path. They're offering an extra $5 an hour.
Yeah.
And now people value that, and it's motivating as well to say, okay, well, if I can hit these KPIs, I can be up here, or I can be in this position. I can be a management role in 2 years. That's awesome. Whereas not everyone's doing that very well.
Yeah, I love hearing those stories because, like I said, we see it and you feel it, the difference. We've done a number of case studies with pretty much every case study has that culture because they're the ones who are seeing the results. And so, that's neat to hear that you're promoting that in your podcast.
So I'm curious now, why don't we make a bit of a segue into the magical world of virtual reality? Because I think for a lot of visitors, a lot of viewers and listeners out there, it's kind of like rainbows and unicorns and some like nerdy game.
That's right. It is a little of that.
I actually did a podcast on virtual reality a little while back, but it was sort of more focused, although I suppose it essentially was talking about VR and construction. It was more about like the finished VR product. So you'd be familiar with, and especially now with the current social distancing
COVID stuff,
right? So now people can actually, go and essentially see completed build for an apartment or a home or whatever it might be that hasn't even started construction. You can basically, well, this is what it's going to look like. Do you want to buy it?
That's right. And that's a beautiful application of the technology. And I think the other one for us, in our case, training, physical hands-on training is also, an incredible application of leveraging this technology. Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about it. The long promise, because we've been hearing about it for decades, right, it came of age, I would say 2017. And even now, there's still a little friction with it because it still requires a nice PC. But we're just moving to just the headset, the goggles by itself with the computer in there at a low price, at like a $300 price point. So the hardware stuff has finally gotten to the place now that it's not getting in the way. So that's exciting. And so now it becomes a bit of a content, can you build the right content and deliver it, et cetera. But a couple things that I like to describe about VR for training, right? How powerful it is. So what training, where you're not in your living room. So what color is the room you can't see in your bedroom right now. What color is the room in your bedroom? What color is the rug in your bedroom?
It's carpet, but it's grey.
Carpet? And what's the difference, carpet? Wall to wall? You got wall to wall grey?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. I don't know why I asked that. What do I care? The reality is what you just did, right? You didn't walk in there and look. You actually created that bedroom space in your head.
Right.
And then you look down, right? In your eye, like in your head, right? You just did it all. Because we use space often as our first tool for recalling information. Mm-hmm. Same reason, like people say, one of the reasons people say hands-on training is the best and, experience, of course, right? Part of it is our brains get to draw on that space. Oh, yeah, I remember being on that rooftop and we were touching this thing. Oh, yeah, I remember being in that basement and it looked like this, right? People love space, use space a lot to draw information from. And so when you think about virtual reality, the first thing I like to say is we're creating space. So we're fundamentally tricking your brain because your brain doesn't know how to be in two places. When you get in there and you have the goggles on, you can see your hands, by the way. You can see your hands, you can control a tool, and you're surrounded. Let's say I'm on a rooftop looking at a 12-ton, rooftop unit. Like, I might as well be there because my brain doesn't know how to tell me, oh, but I'm really standing in my office, because all your senses are telling you otherwise. And so we create that space, and now you can imagine that for sort of the power of recall. The other part of it that's really powerful with VR is presence. So if you're talking about, some of the, when your ass is in a seat and you're in a terrible class and you're not thinking about whatever the instructor is teaching, presence is so valuable for retaining information, gathering. And when you put on the headset, and, the famous brand is Oculus, from the word occlude, you're actually occluding the rest of the world. You are 100% present, or just about, in whatever activity that we're giving you, whether it's installing a solar panel or troubleshooting a heat pump or whatever it is. You're so present that when you're done, you just can draw on that forever, because it's like, Christmas morning, you're so present with your kids and your family, because you're not thinking about your phone and other engagements. You're just present. And that's why we can draw from those moments forever, because you're just so focused. And then the last part of VR that's really compelling about how powerful it is as a training tool is you're engaging your body. And so, if it's simple as, if you're standing there next to your mic there and you knock your coffee over and you go to pick it up, your brain's working harder to say, like, don't do this again. Like, don't this is a pain in the ass. Like, the moment you're moving your body, your brain works harder. So in a VR environment, like if you're fixing a unit and you got to get down low, you're going to be on your knees under there, trying to fix it again in a virtual setting. But you got your body engaged, you got your presence at, peak level, and you've created a space. So VR as a tool for learning, it's going to be tough to beat. And that's why it's had this great history in those other industries we talked about, military, medical, aviation.
So how does it actually work practically, though? I mean, obviously you're not going to have a bunch of your staff members putting goggles on and bumping into each other in the office, like, what are you? I'm just envisaging a whole bunch of
That's right. It's getting there. It will happen. No, a couple of ways. Think of it in a couple of ways. Number one is where the sort of first evolution of it is with Carrier, for example, in the States. And 82 distribution centers now have VR setups. So someone comes in, they don't have to have, let's say the new Infinity VSR heat pump comes out and they want to train on it, and they can send some staff over to it and, put it on and off they go. And what's interesting about it is, one, obviously there's safety things, which are nice. Actually, you're not going to shock anybody in VR. Someone's really, so there's some consequence thing there. That's nice. But two, a lot of times they'll project it. So you'll have one person in there doing it, say, and you'll have other people watching what they're doing. And so it's like we all went on the job site. And so you get a lot of sort of community learning around it too. It's not all just sort of self-edification. There can be community and social learning around it too. So that's sort of phase one, right? You can kind of see it as a place of rally point. In fact, one example I'd like to give is, think about video games. Back when I was in, let's say in the 80s, video games were very social. Like, you'd go over to a buddy's house and 6 people would be watching one person play. And then they'd all take turns, right? Sort of think of that same type of thing. The VR tends to be still a communal event today, but that's okay, because it then invites, like, you can take your 12-person shop and you can effectively have a lab of 50 pieces of equipment that you don't really have, right? If you want to train them. So you think of the power of it there. That's where it's starting. I think what you'll actually get to, and you're going to think I'm crazy, but this device here you're looking at a monitor, I'm looking at a monitor. It's 2D. Yeah. It's 18 inches wide or whatever. I mean, we're going to laugh at that in a decade. We're going to be able to use 3D space to put all kinds of information, and sort of this fits into that. So you are going to see, and there's AR too, we can talk about that, but you're going to start seeing devices get lighter and smaller and more powerful. And, you're going to be surprised that, there's going to be a kid in a living room in rural Australia who will be practicing their trade on a game console. Yeah. right? That's where it goes. And so we're in sort of evolution one of that with this sort of, I would call it almost community training. Although we now have some companies who have issued headsets, issued the $300 headsets, who've started saying, do some stuff at home. I want you working on it. So, and unions, some of the big unions have adopted it heavily. So yeah, that's practically how it works. That makes sense?
Yeah, no, totally. What about, I suppose, from a content point of view? Like, I mean, mate, to be honest, it kind of sounds like the Matrix. It's like you put the mask on, loose on. I know HVAC. Like
yeah. We're not quite, injecting you with the knowledge just yet, but
right, but it's coming.
Yeah. So just so you know, this question often comes up is, let's just use HVAC. We've been using that. We could do any of the trades, but we'll use HVAC. What are you training them on, a specific heat pump type and model, or are you training them on general? And so what we do as a company is we build a big general catalog of learning that's agnostic. That's just the fundamentals, right? So, but if you're an expert, you might look at the model of that split residential air conditioner and go, oh, this is clearly modeled after a Rheem or a York or whoever it is, right? Or I could see, oh, this is like a train, but with this, different coils or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it's general, like really learn the basics of that. And then we also work specifically for manufacturers. So some cases you'll get served, I want to learn how to use this split residential, this ductless system from Gree. Right? Oh, I'm going to look at the ductless system and I'm going to practice those diagnostic codes that come actually with that piece of equipment. So you see different levels, both the general and then the opportunity to do specific training too.
I'm just like trying to, as someone that has no idea about any of this sort of stuff, I was trying to fathom what that journey looks like from when the manufacturer says, oh, this is a new product of ours, we want to train people on it virtually, and how they get that information to you to render. Like how?
Yes. That's our secret sauce, right?
Right. Okay.
We have SMEs, subject matter experts who work for us. We've got instructional designers. We've got an authoring engine that was built just for technical learning.
Right.
So if you want to learn diagnostics or install or commissioning or inspection or equipment operation procedure or preventative maintenance, like we kind of have the template learning already. So if you think about it, like, for installing, regardless of what we're installing, there are some natural steps to it. Like what are the parts, what are things, right? And so a lot of that's templated in there. And so we'll work with the manufacturers and we'll identify all that. One, a lot of times we'll get their CAD files to actually render it. Or sometimes we don't. Sometimes we just have to do straight up art, which is kind of the pig and the python in the process sometimes, but we'll actually have a 3D artist make that piece of equipment. And we have this thing called the EMS electrical mechanical system that actually models the electrical behavior of that piece of equipment in a virtual environment. It's really something. Our first sim that we built back in 2011 took 13 months. Yeah, now we do it in about 3 weeks. So it's a different world today, and it takes participation from the manufacturer and subject matter experts and our instructional designers who work us through that.
Which I suppose kind of raises the question then, like, obviously this is like a fast evolving industry. It's kind of, not that it's ever going to end up like, laser printers or anything like that, or 3D printers. Now you can go to Aldi and buy one at the supermarket. But like back in the day, like, whoa, 3D printing, we could print all these prototypes and stuff. Like, whoa, it's awesome. I paid $25,000 for this thing. Now you can get one for $200 at the supermarket. But like, I'm wondering, like, with obviously the landscape of VR and AR, especially augmented reality, is changing so rapidly. Now there's kids running around chasing Pokemons on their phone. The technology's evolving across the board so quickly. At the moment, like what you were saying, like currently that's quite a big investment for a supplier to be able to say, okay, well, we want you to develop a training program for our new heat pump. Whereas, a lot of companies out there wouldn't have that sort of, that sort of budget.
Yeah. So our primary customer is not that somebody wants something specific. It's like, look, you guys have good fundamental training on really good fundamental trade skills. We're going to buy that, and we're going to buy a low price seat. It's super cheap,
right?
And just get access to all the content, right? If you're familiar with like a LinkedIn Learning or some of these big other online on-demand learning catalogs, pretty much, let's call it white collar skills, right? Like learn how to make a better PowerPoint or be a better public speaker, or work on Excel, run spreadsheets, right? Exactly. There's a lot of that out there. But what we're doing is building a whole catalog of the same thing for the electrical, mechanical, industrial. Oh, learn about torque, learn about, whatever it is. You could be, now we put it in domains. So yeah, it's rare that suppliers you're talking about, those are some of our larger customers in dollars because they come in and they have a big solution. But, fundamentally, it's the catalog of general good learning that I think is the guts of what we do. And so, yeah, that there's sort of two different categories of customers for us.
So essentially, like, you're just trying to make it available and within the grasp of everyday people out there that want to learn something new, right? Like, it's
100%.
not just towards conglomerates.
Nope, it is really, our biggest customers are small and medium businesses by far. Like,
yeah, right.
I need 4 seats for my plumbing. I got some young plumbers. I need 4 seats, or I have 16, techs. I need 12 seats or whatever it is. That's our bread and butter customer. And so they're not contributing to, we want, will you build us this? It's more like, what's buying off the truck right now? What do you have on the truck?
Gotcha.
They get access to all of it. Now, they influence us. They'll say, what we really need is better drain cleaning sims.
Of course.
So we hear that from 3 or 4 of our better customers, and we have a thing called the loop internally that our salespeople put in there, and we review that every month and go, a lot of demand for drain cleaning. Yep. Let's build a sim in drain cleaning. So that just continues to grow the catalog, and it's really market driven. It's not some like curriculum that was written in 1955 that's feeding the trades programs. It's really the market telling us what we really need is, right now we're getting a lot of clamoring for the ductless systems. You guys have a lot of them, but they're just really starting to take off in the US. But a lot of people don't know how to service them. Yeah, and so we're playing catch up here in the States on that. So that's the kind of thing the market told us, and we're building it.
Okay. Yeah, because I suppose that's one thing that makes the beauty of having it technology based is that, like, it's so much easier to adapt and evolve, isn't it? Like, if you want to change a part of a technology-based training program, it's easy to do. And you can roll out, like a software update, just roll it out, update.
Literally what it is. It is exactly it. It's an update. We have a single code base that runs every one of our simulations.
Yeah.
So you think about that, even like the interactions. If we get a better interaction working with the widget, and we're like, let's use a magnetic snapping capability, and it works better, great. We publish it. Every time someone's dealing with the widget in any sim, it works like that. Right. So same thing with parts. Yeah, we've gone away from, whatever the part is, we're switching out. We just go and change the art a little. We, have to do some adjustments. It's not like pull that out of the lab. Let's get another, $2,600 piece of equipment in here. So yeah, you can imagine how that scales.
Or relevant to current curriculum, and the way that training programs are currently run, like, it is so much undoing, and there's so much red tape in order to, change, retrain your teachers, get the right tools into the schools so the kids can know how to, they can use it, like all this kind of stuff. Like, it's a big deal to read. That's why they're teaching, lead welding to a plumbing apprentice.
That's right.
They're never going to use it. It's just
that's exactly
so much that goes about change. So
yeah, we're just agile. I mean, that's goes back to where we started this conversation, right? Leveraging how the rest of the world works, like that workflow. You're talking about some of the tech. I mean, they make a change. So look, there's a better, usability around how you assign invoices. Like, boom, they publish it. I'm sure it's SaaS based, and you'd log in one day and go, that's a better invoicing issuing system. Great. Right, off we go, right? It's not like we're going to send you a ledger in the mail and give you a whole new invoicing system. Like, it's literally instant.
Yeah. And that's I think, like, and when you put it like that, I think most of the, listeners and viewers out there would be like, oh, well, that makes sense, because that's what happens with my software. Like, if Xero releases a new version, which that's probably a bad example because I haven't done it in a long time, but something like, G Suite or one of the job management tools, like when they run an upgrade, bang, upgraded.
That's right.
And that's what you pay.
We do the
SaaS.
same thing.
Yeah.
We have beta. We have right now a beta system on, we call it the command center, which allows service managers to assign courses to techs. Like, hey, Matt needs help in electrical. He's really struggling. Let's give him these 3 courses. And, I can assign them, and I can watch you do, I can see where you're doing, and I could maybe help you if you need help, that kind of visibility. Well, that feature set is just put out to our beta customers right now, and we'll fix it a little bit, and then we'll send it out to more broadly. So just like every software company delivering on in a SaaS model.
So where is the future of this heading, Doug? Like, I feel like we're sort of scratching the surface right now.
Yeah. Well, it hasn't really been named, but you hear it a little bit.
I suppose what I'm essentially asking is, when am I going to get my fucking hoverboard?
And well, we'll keep you on the ground for now, but experiential learning is real now. Like, we're doing it all the time. Like, that's the name of, think of this, experiential. You talked about Pokemon. That's experiential, right? We're out in the world and we're experiencing, a computer interface that's more connected with what we do day to day, instead of, this mouse thing, pretty archaic, right? Like, it's just kind of a weird way to communicate using these computers. So more and more, you're going to see experiential stuff. I mean, you're doing it at home, right? I don't know if you got a Google Assistant or Alexa in there, right? I mean, that's experiential. Hey, Mom, what's the capital of Australia? What is it? Canterbury?
Canterbury?
Shit, no, what is it called? No, damn it.
You were close.
Yeah.
Come on.
Come on. Canterbury?
No, that's in New Zealand. Canberra, there you go.
Okay. Now what do you do? Yeah, damn it. Yeah, now what do? You yell, Alexa, what's the capital, right? So that's experiential, right? It's approaching more how we live our lives normally, and the computer interface sort of gets woven in, opposed to these rather what feel like archaic ways of grabbing computer information. And so we're seeing experiential learning and experiential computing in a lot of areas, and that's where it goes in my mind. That eventually you have this thing, we've been dabbling in this thing called Mentor Me, which is basically a virtual mentor. So if I'm out, not in the field, but in a controlled environment like a VR environment, and I say, why am I checking for 240 volts here? And the virtual mentor would be able to answer that question. So it'd be like having
if you don't, you'll die, idiot.
That's right. You can bring that into play, have some fun, shock people.
Exactly. I've spoken about this as well, probably in the last episode I did on VR and AR, but where do you think, do you guys play it all in AR? Is that something that you see has longevity?
Yeah, definitely. But I see AR more as an efficiency tool.
Before we get started on this, can you just maybe give the listeners and viewers a quick insight to what is as opposed to VR?
Yeah, so virtual reality is like the system will create the whole virtual environment, meaning you're not interacting with the world around you. You're standing wherever you are. Augmented reality is actually being in reality. So remember the famous Google Glass experiment that kind of went sideways, but now that's coming back. Or Pokemon Go, where we're actually in the real world and you're overlaying some kind of information, right? So leveraging some kind of computer interface. For example, a heads-up display where you might be fixing a car and you might have even on your phone. What were we playing the other night with my daughters? The iPad, you can point at the sky and it'll tell you like what
I love that app. Oh.
I mean, that's augmented reality, right? We're in the real world. We're using a computer interface to give us more information. Right. So that's AR. And so in our world, AR has a lot of really good applications, to me, for efficiency.
Yeah.
I don't think it's actually a great learning tool because, again, there's confusion. It's hard to layer in environments. Like, I always argue, like, you could never put any kind of AR device in my head and have me fix my car. It just won't happen. Like, I'm not comfortable enough to know the basics. Now, if I got trained in VR and then now I'm out there and I have an AR device that I can quickly see reference materials or, like, that's where that piece is. I can grab that now, right? So that's powerful. Those are efficiency tools. Or I needed to quickly reference a wire diagram or the like. That's where AR is brilliant. To me, that's about efficiency in the field, not as much about learning.
Because the application that I was told about, I've never seen it. I don't even know if it exists. But when I was at one of these trade shows and this fellow was talking to me about like some possibilities that might be coming out. As a tradesperson, as a plumber, when you go do like a new project or whatever, you're basically given these drawings, right? Like on an A1, thing, and you've got to, and you've got the different types of drawings. You've got your schematics, and you've got your plan drawings, and you've got your architecturals, and you've got your hydraulics, and all these kind of things, right? And you've kind of got to learn how to read those because they're not, it's, like it's not that it's hard, but it takes a certain level of skill on how to understand and how to, I suppose, associate what that is and then put it in reality.
Yeah, connect that 2D world to this world we're living in. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing is as well, like, very often what's given to you in drawing isn't applicable on site. So you've kind of got to, come up with an alternative or whatever it might be, right? Yep. So, but the application that I was told about that could be relevant to, the trades from an AR point of view is exactly that. When you get up on site and you've got to install some plumbing, drainage, stack work, and you've got your drawings there, but you're like, what? Instead, you pull out your iPad or you put your goggles on and you go, oh, and you're actually looking at the ceiling space. You're actually looking at the fire collars. And you go, oh, that's how that stack goes. You can just see it right there. It's been done, and you just go take the mask off and then go and install it as to the drawing. So, I mean, I don't know if that is ever going to be developed or if that's something that's even relevant. But
I mean, think about, you had the other guests on the AEC, the Architectural Engineering Construction, right? So if everything was in 3D before they built that building, before you walk into that building, you could be in your office, access that file, and assuming it was true to the build, which sometimes it isn't exactly as you indicated, you should be able to actually get in the virtual version of that building before you even walk in. You could actually engineer a solution before actually even seeing the building physically, because you could just in your office, you go to a website and it's, 123 Smith Street, and you have access to their files through the, whatever the property manager is or whoever has access. Boom, you put that on, it would probably be VR in that case, but would then continue. You could then take that into the field with you. So you show up on site, you've already seen the building, you've already made those connections. Basically you're looking at a 2D map of that, well, you just described it, schematics and plans. These are just schematics and plans. You've just added a 3D component to it. And so now you could do it before site visit. When you're on there, there's a set of tools you could probably use. I don't know how good the X-ray technology is these days for the kind of thing you're talking about, but that's certainly done with, you've done it probably with infrared stuff, right? So there may be a way to quickly match the infrared where you can see heat, like hot water running quickly with the infrared, or you could have infrared built into an AR, into some kind of handheld device that will allow you to do that. So that's not Star Wars-y, far-fetched at all.
That's interesting, actually, because I never really thought of it from like a maintenance. We have a lot of talk about quoting, and charging for quotes and that kind of stuff, right, within the community. And one of the big issues that a lot of the guys have is, not being able to outsource the quoting side of things, especially if they're in like the renovation space, because you just don't know what's behind walls. And so it's quite off a plan. It's considerably more easy to quote something. The only, obviously you'll have variables in, we hit rock at, at 1200 instead of, 2 meters kind of thing. But like essentially when guys are doing renovation work, you don't know, but until you start ripping out walls and, smashing holes as to, hang on, it's actually block, it's not brick. Shit, that affects our structural load, blah, blah, blah. And so, it's interesting to sort of see if and how, VR or AR could potentially aid that side of the construction industry, because obviously the new stuff, it makes sense, but then existing stuff, that could be a real punish.
We started in energy efficiency, so like especially with the infrared cameras, like depending on, you can run hot oil. I mean, you can do it with the electricity now, like see where it's being run, but instead of doing it by these handheld tools where you're holding it against a wall or something, and I forget what those are called, imagine doing it with a little headset device, like heads up display. So as I look around, it could quickly show me, identify those things. That seems pretty realistic these days.
Like what you just said then, like the amount of times we've had to, get your laser level out and mark on walls, like, things like how awkward it is holding the receiver and having the thing spinning over the back there and trying to with a pen in your mouth, and you're trying to like if you had a mask on and it was just overlaying everything, it would be just.
Those are the efficiency tools. And I talk about AR being incredible for efficiency in the field. That's where AR is really going to make a difference. So, instead of the Pokemon man floating there, trying to capture, there's actually a piece of information that's very valuable for you laid over the real world.
I know there's some cool like suppliers that are doing a sort of an AR thing with, like a plumbing supply company out here called Reese, and they do basically like bathroom, PC items, that kind of stuff. And you can essentially take a photo of your bathroom, and that you can overlay toilet suites or shower screens, or you can. It's pretty clever, actually.
Yeah. I mean, that's experiential computing, right? Okay. Now we're starting to. Now you imagine. Now just put your training lens on, and all the things you can do with training. Now that you can layer things in, change things out, put people through scenarios. And, our stuff, we've talked about VR heavily tonight, or today, tonight where I am. But, most of our stuff is consumed on tablets and desktops still. The VR is kind of the shiny, fun thing that gets everyone's attention, but most people don't have the devices readily available. So they're just living on the online stuff. So this stuff is doable today. Everything you just talked about, right? You can log into those plumbing sites and start sending a picture, and they can quickly figure something out. And, you're seeing all kinds of applications on the sort of front end, and the training world has been kind of the caboose here. So we're really starting to help try to catch it up.
Well, mate, this has been great. Intrigued and very interested. I think it's a pretty exciting space. So I look forward to hearing the progress, and 18 months' time could be considerably different.
Well, we'll do your first VR podcast in 12 months. How about that?
VR podcast.
It'd be like we're sitting in the same room. We could shake hands, although pre-COVID, we probably... I mean, post-COVID, we'll see. But yeah, this was fun, man. I appreciate you having me on.
No, man, I appreciate you taking the time. It's been great. And just for the listeners out there, if they want to get a bit more information or they want to ask you some more in-depth questions, how do they find you?
Yeah, so Interplay Learning, INTERPLAY learning.com is, sort of the central hub of all of this stuff, that catalog, how you get in, prices, all that. Your listeners can also email me directly, Donovan, DONOVAN, at Interplay Learning. Happy to share what little I know, although I'm starting to know a lot about this one little space in the world. So we'll see. We'll see how it all plays out.
Micro-niching, man. It's the future.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much for your time. And for your listeners and viewers out there, if you have any experience or if you have any further questions, please, by all means, head across to the Facebook group, hit us up in there, and I will endeavour to get Doug back on the show to get them answered for you. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing your comments, and enjoy the show. Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to thesiteshed.com, where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from the show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.